Thank you, Pamela, very much. It really is a great privilege to have been invited to speak here this afternoon. As you've just heard, having spent 30 years as a movie producer, I've devoted the past dozen years working in one or other areas of public policy, most particularly in education. This has offered the opportunity to engage with people who every day of their working lives are attempting to mould the building blocks, the quality of which will determine the future of this planet. Those building blocks are our children, and the people I work with are called teachers. If the future looks increasingly like a war, then this most recent generation of teachers are probably the only infantry we've got. And this war I'm referring to is a war between our failed past and the possibility of a far more imaginative future. In essence, as I see it, it's a war between our worst and our better selves. It's also the case that everything, and I really do mean everything, that I've learned through my work in cinema, for UNICEF, and in the various spheres of government, has only reinforced my view that, in the words of the author and scientist H.G. Wells, the future really is a race. It's a race between education and catastrophe. Finding the prospect of catastrophe pretty unattractive, I've been only too happy to throw my energy behind improving the quality, the reputation, and the relevance of education. Al Gore brilliantly caught one aspect of this war on his film, An Inconvenient Truth. But what struck me when I was watching it was that our ultimate success hung to an almost terrifying degree on the emergence of a significantly smarter and more engaged global society. A generation of young people with the skills and attitudes that might steer this world of ours to a far safer place than at present looks likely. H.G. Wells was right. If catastrophe is to be avoided, then education has to triumph. I decided that just as An Inconvenient Truth had been the catalyst for a wider and better informed debate around climate change, what was now needed was a similar debate focusing on the future of education. And after about a year of effort, here, I promise you, is the world premiere of the opening 7 minutes of what at present remains very much a work in progress. I hope you like it. It's just 7 minutes.
If you were some spearheaded guy, I would listen to what you have to say.
My #1 priority for the next 4 years is to ensure that all Americans have the best education in the world.
Ask me my 3 main priorities for government, and I tell you, education, education, and education.
State in your opinion, making it ring in my head all day. And you say, my children weren't the same. My children's children, they're the ones to blame. And you say, in my day we were better behaved. But it's not your day no more. And we are the youth of today. Change your hair in every way. And we are the youth of today. We'll say what we want to say. And we are the youth of today. Don't care what you have to say at all. And maybe if you had a true point of view, I would listen to you. But it's just
the world is facing huge challenges, and they're growing daily in severity, in scale, and in complexity. It's no exaggeration to say that they're not going to go away. Indeed, they will get worse, unless we can start to find solutions, and find them soon. If we are going to survive, we desperately need the next generation to be smarter, more adaptable, and better prepared than any that have gone before.
The UK has one of the highest rates of teenage drinkers in Europe.
Our only chance is to improve the way we teach our young, to find a way that makes the most of their talents, and a way to help them face the challenges of the modern world.
But it's not your day no more. We are the youth of today.
So the question is, does our current education system work?
We'll say what we want to say, and we are the youth of today. Don't care what you have to say at all.
What we have is a system that's shaped by historical forces, but they are now almost totally bankrupt as ideas for education in the 21st century. And I think they're betraying most of our children. Public systems of education paid for from taxation were invented to meet the needs of the industrial economy that was emerging in the 18th and 19th centuries, where we needed a workforce who could do certain sorts of things.
Our ordinary workmen have a tradition of skill behind them.
The high schools of today were essentially designed in the 19th century, and they reached their zenith in the 1950s. In the old days, we say one size fits all. Okay, 30 kids, put them in a classroom, we're going to teach them the same material, you're all expected to get it the same way.
Page 56, boy, page 56.
There's a great emphasis on lining up and bells and, you know, these vast movements from room to room, a bit like movement of vast tribes, really, all at key times, bottlenecks, putting children in age cohorts, regardless of whether that's got any purpose at all.
In the old days, it used to be the teacher as the man or woman, the person up front who knows it all. And here are these young people who are listening to this person who knows it all, and they take it all in, and if it's a good teacher, you know, you all get it and you move on.
There's a tendency to look backwards, always to say, well, there was a golden age of education, and if we just get back to that, you know, everybody will be absolutely fine, all wearing blazers and, you know, boaters and sort of doing reading, writing and arithmetic.
Potty bam, potty bass, potty bat.
Potty bam, potty bass, potty bat, cricket bat.
Schools become steeped in history, in the past, in static knowledge, and fail to capture the here and now. And schools often fail to prepare young people for contemporary society, for the realities of the world in which we are living. And even more significantly, fail to prepare young people for the emerging issues of our time.
How is this helping our children in terms of what they're going to be as adults in 25 years' time, a time we don't really know what it's going to be like? How adaptable are they going to be? How versatile are they going to be? And how confident are they going to be?
Students who are starting school this year are likely to be retiring around 2065. Given that we can't predict with any certainty what the world's going to look like in 10 years or even perhaps 5 years, the very best that we can do is prepare young people for a rapidly changing social, technological, economic environment, that they'll need to be the most flexible, collaborative, resilient, creative generation that really have ever been.
Education is I really think, it's the most fundamental challenge facing human beings, you know, that education will be the key to solving all of the other problems that we've got.
Thank you very much. None too subtle, I guess. But that race that H.G. Wells was referring to has been thrown into very sharp relief, and in ways that he could never have predicted by the economic crisis that's now taken hold across the globe. And I think it's obvious to most of us that we're ultimately going to have to get out of this recession in a rather old-fashioned way, by digging deep inside ourselves and reassessing and readdressing the basics, by seeking ways to improve our creativity and our productivity, by saving more, by studying harder, and by doing all those things that we always knew we had to do, but were either too ill-informed, too complacent, or maybe just simply too stupid to remember. All of you understand this. It is actually what you do. Your most effective work has always been done at the fringe of the marketplace, where both the public sector and the market itself have failed to deliver the necessary goods and services, particularly to those who don't have the economic means to pay for them. You realised years ago that development is far too complex to be left to the public sector, the marketplace, or even simply philanthropy, no matter how well-meaning. The organisations that you created defy the boundaries that traditionally separate welfare and business. You may or may not operate for profit, but your bottom line has always been social transformation, enabling everyone on this planet to take a role in building sustainable livelihoods and just societies. In other words, you are primarily focused on individuals as citizens, rather than as consumers. I continue to believe that whatever we do, wherever we live, we must reassert the fact we are not just consumers. Yes, we may well all be consumers some or even a lot of the time, but every one of us can claim to be a citizen all of the time. And we also accept, and must persuade millions of others to accept, that citizenship entails responsibilities that are every bit as important as the rights that come with them. This becomes increasingly important with the emergence of the visible underbelly of globalization, the economic and socially destructive power of market forces. The idea that economic growth can be pursued with no cost to sustainability or social cohesion has at last been exposed as a complete fallacy. Trust and social capital have been seriously eroded. As my colleague Richard Layard pointed out in a recent article in the Financial Times entitled "A Less Selfish Capitalism," he said, in the 1960s, 60% of adults said that they believed that most people could be trusted. Today, in both Britain and the United States, that figure has fallen to 30%. Now, this fall in trustworthy behaviour is all too clear in the banking sector, but can also be seen in family life, that's to say more breakups, in the playground, fewer friends you can trust, and in the workplace, growing competition between colleagues. And I'd add this: young people are feeling more rather than less marginalised, more rather than less angry and let down, if not positively at times betrayed. Their job opportunities, their environment, their economic future, all are suddenly significantly less secure than they'd been led to expect. Many of them are quite overwhelmed by a feeling of powerlessness, and they're very badly in need of a voice. And this problem can, in my judgment, all too easily go critical when you add the issue of climate change to that of our economic breakdown. As Joss Garman, the young co-founder of the British environmental movement Plain Stupid, said in an opinion piece in the Observer newspaper just a couple of weeks ago, this isn't the next fad. The naive popular narrative that every generation has their thing and that climate change is ours simply doesn't hold. This isn't about being disaffected or rebellious without a cause. This isn't about dropping out, rejecting the norm, culture jamming and hacking the system. This isn't even about altruism. It's not just about defending the rights and lives of those who are less fortunate than us, and it certainly isn't about polar bears. This is about us. For the millennial generation, the patronising clichés fall apart because this isn't about ideals as much as it's about hard science. And as Professor James Hansen, director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, recently said, in the nuclear standoff between the Soviet Union and the United States, a crisis could be precipitated only by the action of one of the parties. In contrast, the present threat to our planet and to civilization requires only inaction in the face of clear scientific evidence of the danger. Now, I think that Joss Garman and James Hansen are onto something incredibly important. And my own position is that at the very minimum we've no serious alternative but to rethink our lifestyles and to find ways to reduce our individual consumption of energy, to begin to embrace what we might call sustainable consumption. And like most moral or ethical questions, it comes down to a relatively simple choice. Each of us, as citizens, consumers, business leaders, have to decide at last to get honest. Not a little bit honest. Not honest abroad, but dishonest at home. Not honest in willing the ends, but rather dishonest in providing the means. No, this time we have to be absolutely honest in facing up to the need for serious change in the way we live and in what we all decide to regard as important. And we're entitled to expect exactly the same degree of honesty from those who seek to lead us and to make vital decisions on our behalf. As the Archbishop of Canterbury put it in a really excellent lecture delivered in Wales a couple of weeks ago, most fundamentally, we need to move away from a model of economics which simply assumes that it is essentially about the mechanics of generating money. Environmental cost has to be factored into economic calculations as a genuine cost of opportunity, and thus a cost in terms of doing justice to future generations. He went on to say, there needs to be a robust rebuttal of any idea that environmental concerns are somehow a side issue or even a luxury in a time of economic pressure, because the questions are inseparably connected. Now, for me, he is bang on the money. These questions are inseparably connected. And for all of us, the wholly unacceptable alternative is to shut our eyes and continue to protest either ignorance or innocence of the real cost of what most of us sincerely thought, me included, sincerely thought was the inevitable but acceptable price of progress throughout the whole of the 20th century. Please believe me, as we grapple with the fallout from the credit crunch, what we now know to have resulted from 25 years of financial folly will be as nothing compared to the whirlwind we'll reap from 200 years of environmental folly. Should we be foolish enough to settle for the do-nothing option, then our children and our children's children are likely to pay a truly crippling price, a price that will make a mockery of the comforts and pleasures that most of us today were brought up with and which we take entirely for granted. Those who follow us will have every justification were they to curse us for having been knowingly irresponsible in jeopardizing their future happiness. I'll actually go a little further. Should we fail to act on the warning signs, should we fail to get to grips with this impending crisis, there'll be no need to ask for whom the bell tolls. It'll be tolling for every man, woman and child on this once beautiful planet. And this time around, we'll only have ourselves to blame. If I may, I'll finish with something I picked up in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago. It's a very short quote from the book, The Great Gatsby, in which the narrator, Nick Carraway, assesses the brutal world of the principal characters, Tom and Daisy Buchanan. He says, they smashed up things and creatures, and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness, and let other people clean up the mess that they'd made. Now, to me, this brilliantly describes our present situation with regard to the financial crisis that we have quite unquestionably brought upon ourselves. But how much more serious will it be if one day this quote also accurately describes the way in which the actions of our generation, have succeeded in smashing up the planet? In every sense, what lies ahead will involve a quite unprecedented degree of collective responsibility, an entirely new understanding of the consequences of each of our actions. Now, you, better than most people, understand that. You understand what it means to our individual and collective futures. You understand the breadth and the depth of change that needs to take place. It's not going to be easy to navigate our way through the many and varied challenges I've described, and the sunlit uplands certainly won't be achieved without a fair degree of sacrifice. But with the freedom that's to be found through a far greater sense of personal responsibility and a genuine commitment to one another, then I sincerely believe there remains enough good in this world to achieve at least some kind of a sustainable future. And for me, being among you today, you represent the living proof that there still is a hell of a lot to fight for. Thank you very much for listening to me.